I never imagined that the woman my son married would publicly humiliate me in a room full of wealthy strangers. One moment, we were sitting down to dinner. The next, my plate was on the floor, and she was laughing while everyone watched in stunned silence. She thought my age made me weak. She thought retirement meant I no longer mattered. Most of all, she believed she could disrespect me without consequences. What happened next exposed secrets that had been hidden for years, pushed my family to the breaking point, and forced all of us to face a truth none of us were prepared for. Before we get into today's story, welcome back to Tales by Laura. If you enjoy powerful stories filled with family drama, shocking betrayals, emotional twists, and satisfying endings, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Let's begin. My name is Lorraine Whitaker, and for most of my 68 years, I believed one thing more than anything else. Money comes and goes, but respect is priceless. I didn't grow up with wealth. I grew up in a small neighborhood on the south side of Atlanta with a mother who worked 2 jobs and a father who drove city buses for 32 years. Everything I achieved came from determination, sleepless nights, and an unwillingness to quit. By the time I was 45, I had built one of the largest private medical supply companies in the Southeast. Hospitals in 5 states depended on my distribution network. People called me successful, but they never saw the sacrifices. I missed birthdays. I missed anniversaries. I missed school plays. I worked while everyone else slept. I did it all because I wanted my children to have opportunities one never had. When I turned 65, I stepped down as chief executive officer and allowed a management team to take over the day-to-day operations. I still owned most of the company, but I no longer wanted the spotlight. I wanted peace. I wanted family dinners. I wanted to spoil my grandchildren one day and finally enjoy the life I had spent decades building. Most importantly, I wanted my son, Brandon, to be happy. When Brandon married Vanessa, I welcomed her into our family with open arms. At first, she seemed wonderful, beautiful, polished, ambitious. She worked in luxury real estate and carried herself like someone who had everything under control. But over time, I noticed things. Little things. She always spoke to wealthy people with kindness and enthusiasm. Yet she treated waiters, receptionists, and janitors like they were invisible. She loved expensive things. Designer purses, luxury vacations, fine jewelry, and she made sure everyone knew exactly how much those things cost. At family gatherings, she often made comments that didn't sit right with me. Some people just don't understand today's world. Or, you can't build real success with old-fashioned ideas. Whenever she said those things, she would glance in my direction. I never argued. I never corrected her. I simply smiled and changed the subject. Because I had learned something in business long ago. Arrogant people usually destroy themselves eventually. You simply have to give them enough time. As the years passed, Vanessa became increasingly obsessed with status. She and Brandon bought a large condominium in downtown Chicago. Then came the expensive car. Then the private club memberships. Then the endless social events with investors and executives. To everyone else, they looked like the perfect couple. But I noticed something else. My son looked tired, exhausted, worried. Whenever I asked if everything was okay, he would smile and say he was fine. A mother knows when her child is lying. Something wasn't right. I just didn't know what. Then came the invitation. One Thursday evening, Brandon called me. Mom, Vanessa is hosting a private dinner next Saturday. Oh! Some of her business partners are coming. A few investors too. She really wants you there. That surprised me. Vanessa rarely invited me to her social events. Are you sure? I asked. Absolutely, he said quickly. Please come. There was something strange in his voice. Almost like he was nervous. Still, I agreed. The following Saturday, I drove into the city wearing a navy blue pantsuit and pearl earrings my late husband had given me years ago. Nothing extravagant, just simple and elegant. Their condominium occupied the top floor of one of the city's newest luxury towers. A doorman escorted me upstairs. The moment the elevator doors opened, I heard laughter. Soft music floated through the penthouse. A server took my coat. Vanessa approached me with a smile that never reached her eyes. Lorraine, she said. You made it. She hugged me briefly. The embrace felt cold. You look lovely, I said. She glanced at my outfit. Oh, thank you. The The way she said it made me suddenly aware that every other woman in the room was wearing designer gowns worth thousands of dollars. I suddenly felt underdressed. That had never happened to me before. Brandon came over and kissed my cheek. "I'm glad you're here, Mom." He looked exhausted. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes. I squeezed his hand. "Are you okay?" "Of course." He lied. Again. Dinner was served an hour later. The dining table was enormous, covered in crystal glasses and expensive china. There were 10 guests altogether. A venture capitalist, a hotel owner, a technology executive, 2 real estate developers. Everyone appeared wealthy. Vanessa sat at the head of the table like a queen. Throughout dinner, she dominated every conversation. She talked about market trends, property acquisitions, luxury investments. Everything sounded rehearsed, like she was performing. Halfway through the meal, one of the investors smiled at her. "Vanessa, you have incredible business instincts for someone your age." She laughed. "Oh, I learned early that success belongs to people who evolve." Then she looked directly at me. "Some people stay trapped in the past." Several guests looked uncomfortable. I simply continued eating. A few minutes later, another guest asked where she found her confidence. Vanessa lifted her wine glass. "You have to stop listening to outdated people who think loyalty and kindness build empires." She looked at me again. This time everyone noticed. Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I kept my expression calm. The room became awkwardly quiet. Then Vanessa smiled. "Oh, don't mind me. I'm just talking about different generations." A few people chuckled politely. Dinner continued for another 10 minutes. Then everything changed. I reached for my water glass. At the exact same moment, Vanessa suddenly pushed her chair back. Her elbow struck my plate. The plate crashed onto the hardwood floor. Food scattered everywhere. Silence filled the room. I looked down. Then I looked up. Vanessa was smiling. Actually smiling. She leaned back in her chair and laughed softly. "Oh dear," she said. No one moved. No one spoke. Then she said words I will never forget. "Well, Lorraine, if you're still hungry, maybe you should pick it up off the floor. Older people hate wasting food, right?" The entire table froze. I saw horror on several faces. One woman nearly dropped her fork. Brandon looked like he couldn't believe what he had just heard. I stared at my daughter-in-law. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she added something even worse. "After all, retired people don't really contribute much anymore." My son whispered her name. "Vanessa!" But she wasn't finished. She smiled again. The smile of someone who believed she had complete power. And in that moment, I realized she had made the biggest mistake of her life. I slowly pushed my chair back. I stood up. I straightened my jacket. I looked directly into her eyes. Then I said 3 quiet words. "You forgot ownership." Her smile disappeared. "What?" I picked up my purse. "You forgot who owns the ground beneath your feet." Confusion spread across her face. One investor looked at me with sudden interest. Vanessa laughed nervously. "What does that even mean?" I smiled. "You'll understand tomorrow." Then I walked toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard Brandon call my name. But I didn't stop. Because by morning, my daughter-in-law's perfect world was going to begin falling apart. I barely slept that night. Not because I was angry. Anger fades. Humiliation doesn't. I kept replaying the scene in my mind. The shattered plate. The laughter. The way Vanessa looked at me as though I were some useless old woman living on memories. By 5:30 the next morning, I was sitting on my back porch with a cup of coffee. The sunrise painted the sky orange and pink, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about my late husband, Charles. He used to say something whenever someone underestimated him. "Never interrupt your enemies when they're making a mistake." I smiled. Vanessa had made a very big mistake. You see, my retirement had been greatly misunderstood. People assumed I sold my company and walked away. I never corrected them. The truth was far more complicated. I still owned 71% of Whitaker Medical Logistics through a family holding company. I also quietly invested in several private firms over the years. A technology company, a real estate trust, a private equity group, and one venture fund that specialized in financing luxury residential projects. What Vanessa didn't know was that her entire business empire was built on money that could be traced back to me. The investment company financing her luxury developments. I was its majority shareholder. The corporate apartment she and Brandon lived in, owned by one of my subsidiaries. The credit line funding her new projects, guaranteed by a trust that carried my signature. I never interfered because Brandon loved her. But after what happened the previous night, I realized something. Silence had become permission, and I was no longer willing to give it. At exactly 7 o'clock, I made my first phone call. Good morning, Mrs. Whitaker. Good morning, James. I need every pending investment connected to Hartwell Luxury Properties frozen immediately. There was a brief pause. Everything. Understood. I hung up. My second call went to our legal department. I need a complete review of every financial guarantee associated with Vanessa Montgomery and her companies. No problem, Mrs. Whitaker. Third call. I contacted the management company that operated the luxury condominium. Please terminate executive housing privileges under Hartwell Luxury Properties effective immediately. The woman on the line sounded surprised. Today. Immediately. Fourth call. I instructed my accountants to suspend access to 2 corporate cards issued under Vanessa's company account. By 7:45, everything was in motion. Then I sat back and drank my coffee. At 8:11, my phone rang. Vanessa. I let it ring. A minute later, she called again. I ignored it. Then again. And again. By 8:30, she called 7 times. I still didn't answer. At 9 o'clock, my son called. I answered immediately. Mom! His voice sounded strained. Good morning, sweetheart. Did you do something? I remained quiet. Mom! Vanessa's accounts are frozen. I sipped my coffee. Oh! The investors are pulling out. I said nothing. She says there must be some mistake. I looked at the sunrise. No, Brandon. There isn't. Silence. Then he whispered, You did this. I corrected a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? I took a deep breath. The misunderstanding that I was powerless. He didn't speak. I could hear him breathing. Then he said softly, Mom, I didn't know. I know. And I did. Brandon had no idea how deeply connected my businesses still were. He thought I had retired completely. Almost everyone did. Vanessa is panicking, he said. I imagine she is. She's crying. I closed my eyes. I felt sorry for my son, but not for her. What happened last night should never have happened. He sighed. I know. Did you stop her? Silence. I hated that silence. Brendan. No. Did you defend me? He didn't answer. I already knew the truth. No, I said quietly. You didn't. My voice broke a little. Mom, I spent my entire life protecting you. Tears filled my eyes. And when someone humiliated me in front of strangers, you sat there. I froze. No, sweetheart. You chose silence. The line became very quiet. Finally, he whispered, I'm sorry. I took a long breath. I know you are. We said goodbye shortly afterward. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time I answered, Mrs. Whitaker. Vanessa's voice was shaking. Please tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding. It isn't. You froze my accounts. Yes. You can't do this. I almost laughed. Actually, I can. There was silence. Then she said, This is because of last night. No. This is because of years of arrogance. I apologized. No, you panicked. She started crying. I'll lose everything. I stared out the window. Funny. Last night you said retired people don't matter. I didn't mean it. You meant every word. Please. I remained silent. I have investors arriving this afternoon. Then you should prepare for difficult conversations. You'll ruin me. I spoke calmly. No, Vanessa. I didn't ruin you. I paused. You built your life on a foundation you never bothered to understand. The line went quiet. Then she whispered, What does that mean? I answered with the truth. The money behind your projects. Silence. The building you live in. Silence. The partnerships you're so proud of. I took another breath. They all lead back to me. Nothing. Absolute silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. No. Yes. That's impossible. No, dear. What's impossible is humiliating someone and expecting them to keep supporting your future. She began sobbing. Then she said something I never expected. Brandon didn't know. I know. Please don't punish him. I looked at my wedding photo sitting on the bookshelf. I'm not. Then I ended the call. At exactly 2:15 that afternoon, my doorbell rang. I already knew who it was. I opened the door. Vanessa stood there. No designer handbag, no expensive jewelry, no confidence. Her mascara had run down her face. She looked terrified. For the first time since I had known her, she looked human. And before I could say a word, she dropped to her knees. Vanessa's knees hit the porch with a thud. I stared at her. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize the woman in front of me. This wasn't the polished, confident woman who had laughed while my dinner lay on the floor. This was someone terrified, someone desperate. Please, she whispered. Please don't destroy me. I didn't move. Get up, Vanessa. She shook her head. I can't lose everything. I folded my arms. That's interesting. She looked up. Last night, you seemed perfectly comfortable watching me lose my dignity. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I made a terrible mistake. No, I said quietly. You made a choice. She lowered her head. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt tired. Very tired. Because this wasn't really about business anymore. This was family. And family wounds always hurt the most. Get up, I repeated. Slowly she stood. I invited her inside. She looked surprised. I led her to the living room and offered her a seat. She sat carefully, twisting her hands together. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally I asked, why? She looked confused. Why what? Why humiliate me? Her eyes filled with tears again. I don't know. That's not true. She swallowed. I was angry. At me. She nodded. Why? She looked away. Then she said something that completely caught me off guard. Because everyone respects you. I blinked. What? Everyone loves you. I stared at her. Brandon talks about you all the time. Your employees adore you. Business leaders admire you. Even strangers seem drawn to you. I said nothing. She wiped her eyes. I've spent my entire life trying to prove I matter. Her voice cracked. My parents never had money. We lived in shelters for years. I softened slightly. I promised myself I'd never be poor again. I remained quiet. So I chased success. She laughed bitterly. No matter how much I achieved, it never felt like enough. I listened. Then I met your family. She looked up at me. You all loved each other so easily. I felt something in my chest. Do you know what that's like for someone who never had it? I didn't answer. She continued. I thought if I became successful enough, people would finally respect me. A tear slid down her cheek. But deep down, I was still that scared little girl. The room fell silent. I felt sympathy. But sympathy doesn't erase cruelty. I sat down across from her. You've had a difficult life, Vanessa. She nodded. But pain doesn't give you permission to hurt people. She lowered her eyes. You humiliated me because you thought I was weak. I'm sorry. You mocked me because you believed power belonged only to people with money. She began crying again. I know. I leaned forward. And that's the tragedy. She looked at me. You spent your whole life chasing power and never learned what real strength looks like. She covered her face. For several minutes, she cried. Then the front door opened. Brandon walked inside. He stopped when he saw us. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying too. Mom! I nodded. He looked at Vanessa. Then back at me. I need to tell you something. Something in his voice made my stomach tighten. He sat down slowly. For a long moment, he stared at the floor. Then he said words I never expected to hear. The company isn't the real problem. I frowned. What do you mean? He looked at Vanessa. She suddenly looked terrified. Brandon. He ignored her. The frozen accounts are just the beginning. I sat up. What are you talking about? He took a deep breath. Then he looked directly into my eyes. Mom, we're in debt. The room became silent. How much? He swallowed hard. Almost $12 million. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? Vanessa burst into tears. Brandon continued. We borrowed money to maintain our lifestyle. I couldn't speak. The apartment. The vacations. The luxury events. The cars. It was all financed. I stared at them. You mean you're broke? He nodded slowly. Worse. I looked at Vanessa. She couldn't even lift her head. How long? 3 years. 3 years. For 3 years my son had been drowning. And I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? He looked ashamed. Because I didn't want you to think I failed. My heart broke. Oh, Brandon. His eyes filled with tears. I kept thinking things would improve. But they didn't. No. I closed my eyes. Suddenly, so many things made sense. The exhaustion. The forced smiles. The tension. The endless need to impress people. Then I asked the question that changed everything. Is there anything else I should know? The room went silent. Brandon looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked terrified. Then my son whispered, "Yes." I opened my eyes. What? He swallowed. The company that funded Vanessa's projects. I nodded. They're not the only people involved. I felt my chest tighten. What are you saying? He looked like he might cry. Then he said, "Someone has been stealing from your company." The room spun. What? He looked devastated. They've been moving money through shell companies. I couldn't breathe. How much? He looked away. Nearly $8 million. I sat there in complete shock. $8 million? From my company? My voice barely worked. Who? Neither of them answered. I looked at Vanessa. She started crying harder. Then I looked at my son. His face turned pale. And in that moment, I realized something terrible. They knew exactly who had taken the money, and whatever they were about to tell me was going to change our family forever. For several seconds, no one said a word. I could hear the grandfather clock in my living room ticking. Tick, tick, tick. $8 million. Someone had stolen $8 million from the company I had spent my entire life building. I looked at my son. Who took it? Brandon's eyes filled with tears. He couldn't answer. I turned to Vanessa. She looked as though she might faint. My voice became firmer. Who took the money? Finally, Brandon spoke. It was thus. The room went completely still. I stared at him. I wasn't sure I had heard him correctly. What did you say? He lowered his head. It was us, Mom. I felt as if all the air had left my body. No. He nodded. We didn't take it all at once. I stood up. No. We started borrowing small amounts. Borrowing. He flinched at the anger in my voice. That's what we told ourselves. I could barely breathe. Tell me everything. Vanessa began sobbing. Brandon wiped his eyes. It started 4 years ago. He looked miserable. One of Vanessa's real estate projects failed. She covered her face. We lost almost $2 million. I stared at them. We should have admitted it and downsized our lives. Instead, they had hidden it. Vanessa was afraid everyone would find out. She whispered, I didn't want to be poor again. I looked at her. Then what happened? Brandon sighed. I had access to some vendor accounts through one of my consulting contracts with your company. My stomach dropped. We moved money. Small amounts at first. A few $100,000. Then another. And another. I sat back down because my legs suddenly felt weak. You stole from me. Tears streamed down his face. Yes. From your own mother. Yes. I had survived business wars, betrayals from competitors, and lawsuits. Nothing had prepared me for this. Because this wasn't a stranger. This was my child. I felt my heart breaking in real time. Why? He looked shattered. Because every time we took money, we promised ourselves we'd put it back. But then we needed more. I closed my eyes. And the debt kept growing. He nodded. We became trapped. Vanessa finally spoke. I pushed him. I opened my eyes. She was crying so hard that her shoulders shook. It was my fault. Brandon shook his head. No, it wasn't. Yes, it was. She looked at me. I kept telling him we were one deal away from fixing everything. Another sob escaped her. I kept saying we'd pay it back. I couldn't speak. She wiped her face. But every time we lost money, I borrowed more. The room became silent. Then I asked the hardest question. Why humiliate me? Vanessa looked ashamed. Because I hated myself. I frowned. What? She looked directly at me. You represent everything I wish I had. I didn't understand. You built something real. You earned people's respect. You have family who loves you. Her voice trembled. And I built my life on appearances. She began crying again. When I looked at you, I saw everything I wasn't. I stared at her. So I convinced myself that you didn't matter anymore. I felt tears in my own eyes. That's why you mocked me. She nodded. I wanted to feel powerful. The room fell silent. Finally, I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning to set. I thought about my late husband. I thought about the years I spent working. I thought about the nights I slept in my office because payroll had to be met. And I thought about my son, the little boy who used to run into my arms after school. How had we gotten here? I felt old. Very old. After a long time, I turned around. How many people know? Brandon swallowed. No one. The fraud investigation. He shook his head. It hasn't reached us yet. I looked at him carefully. You mean the auditors haven't discovered your involvement? He nodded. I sat back down. There were only two paths forward. I could call the police, or I could try to save what remained of my family. Neither option felt like a victory. Then something unexpected happened. Vanessa stood up. She looked directly at me. I'll confess. The room went silent. Brandon looked shocked. What? She wiped her tears. I'll tell the investigators everything. Vanessa! No. She shook her head. I'm tired. She looked exhausted. I've spent my whole life pretending. She turned toward me. You were right. I said nothing. Real power isn't money. She took a deep breath. It's being able to sleep at night. I watched her carefully. I don't remember the last time I slept peacefully. Brandon looked devastated. She turned to him. I'm sorry. He began crying. I'm so sorry. Then she looked back at me. I can't undo what I did. No, I said quietly. You can't. But I can tell the truth. The room became silent again. Finally I asked, if you confess, you may go to prison. She nodded. I know. You could lose everything. Another nod. I already have. I looked at her for a long time. For the first time since I had known her, I saw no arrogance, no pride, no mask, just a frightened woman who had finally become honest. Then my son stood. He looked at me. No. I frowned. What do you mean? He took a deep breath. If anyone confesses, it should be me. Vanessa looked horrified. No. I moved the money. I encouraged you. But I did it. They both started arguing, each trying to protect the other. I watched them in stunned silence, and then I realized something. For the first time in years, they were telling the truth. For the first time, they were acting like a family. I raised my hand. Enough! They both looked at me. I took a deep breath. Then I said the words that changed everything. Tomorrow morning, we're going to my attorney's. They stared at me. All three of us. I stood up. And after that, I paused. We'll see whether this family can survive the truth. The next morning, none of us slept much. By 8 o'clock, we were sitting inside the conference room of my attorney's office. The same room where I had signed billion-dollar contracts. The same room where I had celebrated victories. And now, I was here with my son and daughter-in-law, preparing to uncover one of the greatest betrayals of my life. My attorney, Benjamin Carter, looked from me to Brandon and Vanessa. You said this matter is serious. I nodded. It is. I turned toward my son. Tell him everything. Brandon took a shaky breath. Then he did. For nearly 2 hours, he explained every transfer, every shell account, every falsified invoice, and every attempt to cover their tracks. Vanessa spoke too. She admitted her role. She admitted the pressure she had placed on him. She admitted lying to investors and pretending they were wealthier than they actually were. When they finished, the room was silent. Benjamin removed his glasses. Well, he said quietly, this is significant. I closed my eyes. Can the company survive it? He nodded. Yes. I exhaled. But there will be consequences. I already knew that. There always are. He folded his hands. The good news is that you've discovered this before federal investigators did. Brandon looked up. What does that mean? It means you still have options. Hope appeared on his face for the first time in months. Benjamin continued. If every dollar is returned, if all parties cooperate, and if the company reports the issue voluntarily, criminal prosecution becomes far less likely. Vanessa burst into tears. She covered her face. Brandon looked as though he might collapse. I leaned back in my chair. I suddenly felt 10 pounds lighter. Not because the betrayal hurt less, but because there was finally a path forward. Then Benjamin looked at me. The question is whether you want to pursue charges. Everyone looked at me. Brandon. Vanessa. my attorneys. The entire room waited. I looked at my son, then at my daughter-in-law. I thought about the dinner, the shattered plate, the humiliation, the disrespect. I thought about the sleepless nights and the sacrifices that built my company. Then I thought about my late husband. Charles had always believed in accountability, but he also believed in mercy. Finally I spoke. No criminal charges. Both Brandon and Vanessa looked stunned. Benjamin blinked. Are you sure? I nodded. But there will be conditions. I turned toward the two of them. Every asset you own gets sold. They nodded immediately. The penthouse. Yes. The cars. Yes. The jewelry. Yes. The memberships. Everything. Tears streamed down Vanessa's face. I wasn't finished. You'll spend the next 10 years repaying every dollar you took. We will, Brandon said. And neither of you will ever work in my company again. Their faces fell. I took a deep breath. Trust can be rebuilt. I paused. But some positions can never be recovered. They both nodded. Then I said one final thing. And you're both getting professional counseling. Vanessa looked surprised. I looked directly at her. Because your problem was never money. Tears filled her eyes. It was fear. She began crying again. For the first time, I walked over and hugged her. At first she froze. Then she collapsed into my arms. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I know. I never wanted to become this person. I closed my eyes. Neither did I. We stood there for a long time. Then I hugged my son. And for the first time in years, he cried like the little boy I used to know. The following months were difficult. The penthouse was sold. The luxury cars disappeared. The designer clothes were auctioned. They moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment. For the first time in years, they lived within their means. The company recovered. The missing funds were gradually returned. The board never learned the full truth. Only my attorneys and accountants knew everything. As for Vanessa, she changed. Not overnight. Change like that never happens overnight. But little by little, she became someone different. She volunteered at community shelters. She stopped caring about status. She found a regular job with a non-profit housing organization. And every Friday evening she visited me. At first, the visits were awkward. Then they became comfortable. Eventually, they became something I looked forward to. One evening, almost a year later, we sat together on my back porch. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Vanessa looked at me. I still think about that dinner. I smiled. So do I. She laughed softly. I was horrible. I raised an eyebrow. That's one way to put it. She smiled. Then her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said something I had learned a very long time ago. People make mistakes. She nodded. Some mistakes are terrible. Another nod. But if someone truly changes, they deserve a chance to become better. She wiped her eyes. I'll spend the rest of my life proving you were right to forgive me. I smiled. You don't have to prove anything to me. She looked confused. Then who? I gently touched her hand. Yourself. She cried again. A few months later, she and Brandon renewed their wedding vows in a small church ceremony. No wealthy guests. No expensive decorations. No luxury. Just family. And love. As I watched them exchange vows, I realized something. The greatest revenge isn't watching someone lose everything. The greatest revenge is watching someone become better because of a lesson they almost destroyed themselves to learn. And as for me, I learned something too. Never confuse silence with weakness. Never underestimate the quiet person at the table. Because the person everyone ignores may be the very person holding the power to change everyone's future. And respect. Respect still costs nothing. But arrogance can cost absolutely everything. If this story touched your heart, let it be a reminder that respect should never depend on someone's age, status, or bank account. Sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the greatest strength, and sometimes the most important lessons come from our biggest mistakes. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and let me know. What would you have done if you were in my position? Would you have walked away, or would you have given them a second chance? And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to Tales by Laura and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story of family, betrayal, redemption, and justice. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Until our next story, take care of yourselves, cherish the people who truly love and respect you, and remember, real power never needs to shout, and kindness is never a sign of weakness. I'll see you in the next story on Tales by Laura.